Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's so difficult to speak after Professor Wecht. What can I do now? Everything that I say will sound so little and dull. And I'm very excited to stand here today in front of you, mainly because I'm a forensic pathologist and I'm not used to the company of people who are alive. So please move in your chairs, just to remind you, in the army here, everything that it doesn't move is painted in white, all the trees, the stones, everything. In my practice, in my natural habitat, everything that doesn't move is being cut. So, you in the first rows, be careful. Anyway, it's a great honor to be here, actually, because I'm here amongst giants. Professor Wecht and Professor Noguchi are the people that I read their articles when I was a young forensic pathologist, and I never thought that I will meet them in my life. And this is a really great honor for me to be here on the same stage with them. And I want to talk today about, by the way, after hearing Professor Wecht, usually a friend of mine told me, when you give a talk, you should talk as little as possible so people will not understand how little you know. So in this case, I decided to make my talks inversely proportionate to the IQ of the audience. In this case, I have to go home now, so I'm sorry. So I'm talking about incapacitating terrorists, and usually, in forensic medicine, we are dealing with the victims, and terrorists are not victims, as we say, morally, but because they did the act. But let's talk about them. As far as I know, this is the first research or first work that was done on bodies of terrorists. But first, what is terrorism? There is no universally agreed definition of terrorism. The word terror is coming from terrere in Latin, which is intimidating or frightening and so on. But since there is no universally accepted definition, we took several criteria that are acceptable by the UN, and you can read them by themselves. The main thing is that the act is not specifically pointed to one person, but it is in order to perpetrate a political or a wide thing and to influence a wider circle, and not just the immediate vicinity. And also, the last one is a little bit problematic because it should be also immoral. And what is immoral, but it is not our, it's not in our discussion right now, but we try to put people that are, can match to this criteria. The other thing is, what is incapacitation? Of course, incapacitation, you can incapacitate terrorists by taking their weapons. It is not my business, of course, I'm not the police. Arresting them or incarcerating, it's not my business, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about physical neutralization. My business is death. So let's talking about what happens to terrorists that are being killed, okay? So we collected 340 cases, 46 cases from 2001 and until 2016, sorry. 13, we were excluding them because there was not enough information in the files, and we remained with 333. Most of them, or not most of them, 135 were suicide bombers. I think we can imagine the cause of death of these people. And 197 were incapacitated by gunfire. We are going to concentrate on them, and if we'll have time, I will talk about one case of a terrorist who was stabbed to death, and this is very strange how a terrorist is stabbed to death. Okay, of these 333 cases, 6 were women, all of them were suicide bombers, and we did autopsies on 1/3 of them, only on 1/3 of them, because autopsies in Israel are not as easy as in other countries. The family has to agree, and if not, there should be a court warrant, and not always the court is accepting the request of the police or the authorities to do an autopsy. And the rest, the 2/3, did not undergo an autopsy. They had an external examination by a forensic pathologist and a radiology test. These days it is a CT scan, but up to 5 years ago it was only plain total body x-rays. Identification of the 333 cases, only 64 were scientifically identified. And the emphasis here is on the word scientifically identified, because we know who they are. The terrorist organizations are actually very proud of them and announce immediately, before the terrorist act, they announce who is the terrorist, of course, and we know who they are, but why didn't we identify them scientifically? Because in order to scientifically identify a person, you need to take data from the body, PM data, post-mortem data, and compare them to data, same data that they taken from the person while he was alive. For example, fingerprints you take from a dead person and actually compare it to fingerprints from a person who was alive and see if they are matched. So the AM, the antemortem and postmortem data should be matched. But we don't have antemortem data of terrorists most of the time because they are not in our registration. They didn't go to the Israeli army most of the time, so they don't have fingerprints or dental records or DNA at the files. 46 were identified after the burial because we got the antemortem data later. The mean age of them was 23 of the terrorists, so they are very young. Now you can see here the number of terrorists incapacitated by gunfire in relation to the total number of terrorists per year. You can see that the years that you have the Intifada here, we have a lot of terrorists that were actually exploding themselves. This is the total number, and this were totally that were not the light color is the people that were shot, so they didn't explode themselves. You may ask yourself, the Israelis here, what happened in 2015? Because there was the knife Intifada. How come there are so little number of terrorists here? Well, then the police made some kind of a decision not to bring the terrorists to investigation in our institute, and I don't know why is that. So then we only checked 5 terrorists per year, although there were many more. This is the average number of entrance wounds in the bodies. So I can tell you already the average number of entrance wounds of shots in the bodies was 13.5, which is a lot. And you can see that in the median and the average number is sometimes very similar, but sometimes it's very different, which shows you that few of the bodies got a lot of shots. We will talk why there were so many shots. This is the distribution of injury sites. You can see that most of the terrorists were hit from the front, I mean the front of the trunk. At the second place, there is the head and the upper limbs, and then the lower limbs, and then the back. Why shooting a person in the back? We will talk about it later, what can be the justification or the reason of shooting a person in the back. So what are the conclusions regarding the number and the distribution of wounds? First of all, many shots. Why so many shots? You can incapacitate a person by 1 or 2 shots. Why do you need to shoot so much? Maybe it reflects the panic or the status of fright. It's not a sterile environment. People are running, people are shouting, people are afraid. Even the shooter is afraid. It can reflect the dynamic nature of the event. You know, the lawyers, usually in court, when I'm giving evidence, the court is imagine or portray the scene as something very static. You know, a person is standing and stabbing another person, the victim is standing like this, and the shooter is standing like this and shooting. This is not the truth. People are running, people are escaping, they are crouching, they are crawling, so many times you cannot aim very specifically. And it also can represent overkilling or assurance of neutralizations, which means somebody was shot after he was already incapacitated, which is something that should not be done, but we don't know that. The distribution of injuries can represent inaccurate shootings. Maybe the shooter was not very good, or maybe they tried to incapacitate without killing, like hitting the legs or the arms first. We don't know that. I want to show you something here from a security camera. This is maybe the Israelis here saw it before. A worker of the phone company took apparently was extremist, he took the car of the company and ran into a bus station where people were waiting for the bus. And then he went out of the car, took a cleaver out of his pocket and started hitting people. A guard from a shop nearby, in Israel we have guards in some shops, and then he came and started shooting him, and let's see what happened here, okay? Okay, you can see the car is coming here, hitting the people, flicking over. Yes, hitting the bus station. He should get out now. It took him less time last time I saw the movie. I don't know what happens to him. He's coming out, and he started hitting with the cleaver the people you can see there. You see this coming and hitting the people, and then the security guard is coming. He hit shot 1, 2, 3 shots, okay? You can see that the terrorist is still moving. Four shot. The guard is kicking the knife now, the cleaver. The terrorist is still moving. People are coming, they are thinking that the guard is the terrorist. He explained the situation. It's easy to explain when you have a gun in your hand. You know, the terrorist is rising up, you see? 5 shot, 6 shot. people are coming, try to hit the terrorist, he's rising up. 7 shots, that's it. So why did I show you this? Just to demonstrate what every forensic pathologist knows, that shootings are not necessary for this. Shootings are not necessarily immediately capacitating people. Only few places in the body, for those of you, for the few of you who are not forensic pathologists here, only few areas in the body are immediately incapacitating, like the brainstem or the aorta if you want, but you can shoot a person in his abdomen, in his chest, and he can still operate. He's not immediately incapacitated. The immediate act of shooting is actually psychological. Oh my God, I've been shot. But you know, if we are shooting a psychotic person or person who is highly on drugs, he will not stop. He will continue until physically or physiologically he won't be able to perform any act anymore. So this is why maybe you have to shoot many times in order to incapacitate a person. We talked about entrance wounds in the back. 76 terrorists had entrance wounds at the posterior aspect of the body. And 10 of them had entrance wounds only at the posterior aspect of the body. 4 had entrance wounds on their backs only. This seems very strange because you can say that the person ran away and you shot him while he was not threatening you. Why did you do that? And I want to give you one case of an example. And this is not a terrorist. It was not included in our criteria. It's a guy that was shot by Israeli army in October 2016. The soldiers reported that the guys tried to throw stones on them. And they started chasing him, and they made a suspect apprehension procedures, which means telling him, if you will not stop or we will shoot you. And then they had to shoot in the legs and so on. And then he crouched and tried to throw stone on them. And they shoot him. The Palestinians said that the shooting was carried while the person was going away from them and was shot from the back. And this is the CT scan, okay? This is just a wound here and some blood in the chest cavity. Let's see, 3-dimensional, it'll be easier to know. The little spots here are just fragments of a bullet or a metal object. You can see them there. And let's just do a CT 3-dimensional thing to see. This is the vertebrae of the back. You can see the entrance from here, and if we're turning it around, by the CTs today are very sophisticated, more than I understand, you can see the vertebra is opened. So this means that the bullet came from back to front, okay? He opened the vertebra, and this was the result of the autopsy. So the bullet came from behind. So the Palestinians said that the shooting was completely unjustified. He was fled away. And the soldiers, sorry for my English, by the way, and the soldiers insisted that they shot the guy from the front. How can it be? Let's talk about why shoot a person in the back. First of all, maybe the Palestinians are right. Maybe they were hitting him while he was escaping and he wasn't a threat anymore. But in this situation, sometimes we have to remind that the shooter is not necessarily the one who is threatened. Maybe the terrorist is threatening somebody else, and the shooter is shooting to protect somebody else and not himself. And another thing that forensic pathologists here are in the knowledge of, that sometimes you are aiming at the front, but then the terrorist is turning simultaneously. Now that seems, insane. How can it be? Is a shot slower than a person that turning around? So I just want to quote one of the most knowledgeable persons about gunshot wounds, Vincent Di Maio, and he says, sooner or later a medical examiner will become involved in a shooting where an individual claims to have shot at another individual facing them, but at autopsy the gunshot wound is found to be at the side or at the back, like it was here. The question then arises as to whether the victim, on seeing the gun pointed towards them or reacting to another outside stimulus, would have the sufficient time to turn 19 or 180 degrees at the time from when the shooter initiated the shooting process and the bullet hit. Again, this sounds very strange. Let's see some research about this. Why doesn't it go? Okay. So let's talk about the response time. How much time it needs to shoot the trigger, to press the trigger when you hear the word shoot, when you're given a command to shoot. Well, if the finger is on the trigger, it's about 1/3 of a second. If the finger is outside of the trigger guard, it's 2/3 of a second. But this is not the real scenario. The scenario is that you have to decide to shoot first. How long is the decision time? And there were a series of experiments about this. For example, showing a person a green light and then tell him you can shoot, and red light means you can't shoot, so he has to decide. But this is a very simple scenario. So the average decision time is about half a second. So totally, the decision time and the response time is about 1 second. How much time takes to turn yourself over in 100 degrees, or 180 degrees, sorry. 90 degrees is 1/3 of a second, and 180 degrees is 2/3 of a second, which means that the time for a person to shoot, to decide to shoot and perform it, is longer than the other person to turn around. Now, this sounds very strange, but courts, not only in Israel, but in many cases in the world, accepted the fact that the person said, I shot him in the front, but the bullet is in the back because of this thing. Not always, of course, sometimes people are being shot from the back in the beginning, but this is one of the options that are available. The range of fire. All the shots were from distant range, besides 3 terrorists that were shot at close range. Close range without skin contact, I mean few centimeters, 2-3 centimeters. So why does coming to a person and shooting from very close range? If you can shoot him from a very close range, probably is not a threat anymore. Let's see one example. Maybe it is, maybe this is the possibility, but I want to show you one example from 2008, where a terrorist was driving a tractor, a Caterpillar, flipping buses over, injuring people, and he was shot 4 times by a soldier that was on vacation. He didn't have any gun, but the policeman was standing there, didn't know what to do, so the soldier took his weapon, took his gun, climbed on the tractor, and shot the driver. And I want to show you this. Oh, I'm sorry for this. I asked Oren, what should I show them? And he said, oh, show some disgusting picture, and that's it. And no, he didn't say it. I'm a pathological liar, so it's not... so I want to show you something. It was in the news only once, and then they thought it's too much. So I'm sorry that if it is too much. You can see the tractor here. You can see the soldier here, okay? After he climbed on it. Let's go closer. And you see, here are the shots. You understand why the shots are from such a close range. Indeed, there was a threat here, but he didn't threat the soldier. He threatened the other people there, okay? So that can be one of the explanations here. Medical treatment. Of the 197 cases of terrorists that were neutralized by gunfire, only 3 we saw signs of medical treatment. 2 of them came from hospitals and 1 from the area, from the scene. This is very few. Why so few people? You know, after he is not a threat, you should treat him medically. Why so few of them received medical treatment? We have several reasons. First of them, you saw how many injuries they had. So many gunshot wounds they have, so probably they were dead and there was nothing to do, many of them. Sometimes there is a continuous threat. Many bodies that comes to the Institute of Terrorists, they still have their apparatus on them. And we are calling to expert of bombs to detonate that, or to just take care of it, because we don't get close to the bodies until it is being taken away, or in some way. And but the main reason is these numbers does not reflect the actual number of terrorists who received medical treatment, because many of the terrorists did not die. And they just been shot, but they didn't die. They came to hospital. They are not in this research. And many of them died at the hospital, but then they didn't come to the institute. They didn't come. They were brought to the institute. They never come alone to the. But they never brought to the institute. So because the police said that the medical records of the hospital are sufficient, so we didn't check them. So actually, this is not a representative number of medical treatment. Toxicology, I'm ashamed to say, but only 30 of the people, of the terrorists, undergone a toxicology screen, and from these only 1 had materials like MDA and MDMA, ecstasy, in his blood. This is in counter to the common belief that terrorists are doing the things because they are drugged or they are given something. No, they're not giving anything most of the time. Who were the responders? This is surprised. 54, by 27%, were shot by the military personnel. You saw how many soldiers we have here, but actually most of the cases happened in conflict areas. So maybe that's the reason. But I want to draw your attention to one thing, that 17% were shot by civilians. This shows the prevalence of weapons in Israel. Now we have a very big discussions about registration for a weapon or license for a weapon, and it may show something. In 7 cases, but it's missing information, we found that the person that was attacked was the responder. So it's not a lot, actually. And if I have some time, 1 minute, okay, 2 minutes enough. I want to talk about the guy that was, the terrorist that was stabbed to death. This is a guy that tried to attack people with a knife in a market in Petah Tikva, and he stabbed a 40-year-old man. It's not written here, but the 40-year-old man was about 150 kilos and had an 8 centimeters of fat tissue underneath the skin. So the terrorist stuck the knife in the skin but couldn't take it out. So the guy, the fat guy, took it out and started stabbing the terrorist. And that's how terrorist was incapacitated by a knife. And so that's just to end it. And the summary is the terrorists are usually neutralized by gunfire with large number of shots. Entrance wounds are located in various bodies area and from different directions. And the pattern of injury reflects the dynamic nature of the event. And of course, large number of terrorists were neutralized by citizens. This is the end of it. Thank you very much. And I hope that we see you only in happy occasions in Israel, that I never treat you.